All right, everybody, good morning and welcome back to the KSR YouTube channel. Got a couple different projects we're going to show you today. One of them is kind of going to be a how-to on kind of like a complete stainless steel exhaust system like we do. So that'll be for Donnie's SN95 Mustang. It is LS powered. Sorry about you Ford guys. Or technically, is it really a Gen 3 small block Ford? I'll leave that up to you LS versus Ford guys to fight out in the comments. So anyways, another project that some of you have seen in the background and wondered about is Grant and Chuck's NC Miata ChampCar. And we are prepping this, and they're here also in the afternoons to get this ready for the ChampCar National Championship that is this weekend up at a track I've never heard of before. So anyways, the track is in Missouri. I haven't even done my research on it, but
apparently it's brand new.
Yeah, I guess it's a brand new track over in Missouri. Something to do with Ozark. I should probably look that up, but you can find that out if you want to go look for it yourself. But we're doing kind of just some going over it, changing the fluids. We had to swap out some diff bushings because the diff bushings were worn out. They also installed like a new drive shaft. Or actually Drew's going to once we get the diff bushings back in this morning. So getting this thing ready to go. They have won several races with this car already. And, Grant and Chuck are pretty awesome behind the wheel and have built themselves a really good car. We had originally done the roll cage and some of the aero work on this car originally, which you can't see too much of the cage from down here, but 352 representing our area code, and they're going to try to go win a national championship this weekend. So I'm going to jump into the exhaust work on Donnie's Mustang here and show you guys what I've done so far, and then we're going to walk you through kind of my process and the time it takes, as well as the material cost and everything else that's involved with doing a completely custom stainless steel one-off exhaust system for this car. All right, so the exhaust system we are doing for Donnie's Mustang to support his, I believe it's a 421 cubic inch small block or 430 cubic inch LS. So it's got LS7 heads on it from actually from Texas Speed. We're going to be doing a 3.5 inch X-pipe exhaust, and then at the mufflers we will taper down to 3 inch. Then there will be a V-band, muffler, another V-band, and then over the back, or over the axle, 3 inch tailpipes that will come out kind of like the stock ones did. Now they don't make these parts for a SN95 Mustang, so we got to make our own. The first thing I've done is I took some bends from a Vibrant multi-bend. You can see where I've cut this down here maybe. It's a little rough still, I have to dress that up. But this had a 180 on it, and we're going to use that for the rest of the project. But cut this off and then started fitting these together so that we've got a nice, you know, a nice little hole in there for the pulses to bleed across. And I've got to, my next step is going to be to cover the ends of this with some foil and then back purge the inside of it, finish TIG welding this, because what I have learned with stainless, let's say, is it moves a lot when you weld it. So I'm going to go ahead and weld this so that this piece is done and not going to move anymore. And especially with these long welds right here, it's going to be trying to pull this and everything. So what I don't want to do is have this tack welded and say I've fitted in the car and I build the pipe that connects up to the headers, and then we come back and we weld everything and now it doesn't fit anymore. So we're gonna add one piece at a time, fully weld it, so then when we build the next piece, there's even less room or less ability for the stuff to flex. So once this is all said and done, which I don't think I'll finish it today because there's a lot to do. Once this is all said and done, we're gonna add up all the material costs, all of the labor time, minus the time that I've spent filming, but all of the costs involved with doing this exhaust system. I think it's gonna surprise you on just how expensive doing something like this is. But it's gonna be an awesome system when it's done. It's time for me to get started and get to work. All right, well, we're gonna haul off into welding this X-pipe up, and you guys have seen me wrap the pipes with foil before, but if you didn't know, if you're new to the channel, what I am doing is sealing off the ends of the pipes, and I'm going to backflow argon inside of the pipe to protect the inside of the weld. Now, I'm using a Furic cup, F-U-R-I-C-K, I believe, and those cups have really good gas flow over a broad range, and when I get down into this area right here, I can actually hang the tungsten out of the cup over an inch and still get adequate coverage to have a nice weld. I'm also using a technique where I just lay the filler rod in the, like over the gap or over the joint that I'm connecting. There's less than 50 thousandths gap all the way around this entire joint, and I basically try and make every single connection on these exhaust systems where there's no gap at all. Like I could almost fuse weld these things and not have to worry about there being any kind of leak. Maybe on some show car exhaust, it's not going to really get any abuse put into it. Fuse welding would be okay, but to have a little bit of extra strength, I do use a 35 thousandths filler rod when I'm joining pipe to pipe, but when I'm joining like a Y pipe where I've got a lot of material right there, I use the thicker filler rod because I'm blowing it into like a valley instead of just a like connecting two pieces of pipe that are equal thickness. And now that we've got that welded, we take it over to the car, and basically what I'm going to do is push the X-pipe forward so that it touches the drive shaft loop and lift it up high enough so that it centers itself on the drive shaft in the rear. Now, obviously when the car's on the ground, the drive shaft is going to go up, so that'll create the clearance there. And I'm going to fit and get the angles right to where you can see I've got a cut piece of pipe here that I'm going to weld. And the goal is that the next piece of pipe is a perfectly straight piece of pipe from the header collector back to the X-pipe. So then what I'll do to create clearance between the X and the drive shaft loop is I will just add a 1/2 inch so that it pushes the X-pipe 1/2 inch backwards in the car. Might be able to see it now that I'm putting it back up in the car, but you'll see here, I'll push it forward against the drive shaft loop, lift it back up against the drive shaft itself. That just happened to be what worked out for the right height. So I've got a piece here that I'd already measured, and it pushes everything back. I can't remember if I went 1/4 inch or 3/8 of an inch longer, maybe even 1/2 inch, but I created enough clearance between the X-pipe and the drive shaft loop. And just in case there's any angle, because I think there was, I think I had to angle the forward end of this straight pipe just a little bit because the header collector isn't perfectly straight with the center line of the car. I marked the pipe so that I knew that I got the orientation right, and then we're going to bring it over to the bench, tack weld it. Now when I'm just tack welding, I only fuse weld them in like 2 or 3, maybe even 4 spots just to locate it and keep it from rotating around. And that way I'm not putting so much heat into it that I overheat it and get the contamination on the inside of the weld. It's just a very, very, very light tack. And what that also lets me do is break it off if something is not where I need it to be. So after another test fit, back up in the car, I'm wiping all of the Sharpie marks off of it. And yes, that was brake cleaner. It's non-chlorinated brake cleaner, which is actually okay to wipe your weld area down with. Do not use any kind of chlorinated brake cleaner or carburetor cleaner to wipe off your welds because the gas that gets created is very bad for your health. All right, so now that we've got that out of the way, and now that I've tack welded the 2 pieces of pipe that we fit earlier in the time lapse, what I'm doing now is tack welding the V-band. Now I'm not going to fully weld the V-band when I fully weld the pieces of pipe that I fit, because I want to be able to have a little bit of an adjustment there right at the end if need be once I complete the entire rest of the exhaust. So we're going to be completing the middle section of the exhaust with the exception of the driver's side on the front half of it, just because we need to be able to have access to the shifter area as well as the wiring. We've got to get the wiring harness poked up through the floor, but that's coming in a future episode. So got it back over onto the bench now, and we're going to go ahead and fully weld it up. You can see we put the foil covers on the end. I do know there's plugs that go inside of a 3.5 inch pipe or other size pipe, but for me, the foil has always worked. It's cheap and it's readily available, and it can fit odd shapes like around a V-band. Let's say when, we're trying to weld a joint around a V-band. Well, it's really easy to just cover that in foil and put a rubber band around it to seal it off. And it's, like I said, it's worked. I can be a creature of habit, let's say. So if I find something that works, well, that's what I'm going to keep on doing. And you might notice that I've got some glasses on while I'm welding. Those are just kind of like some reader magnifying glasses that magnify the weld area for me. It makes it even clearer because you need to be able to see what you're welding to perform the best weld that you can. So we've got that welded, pulled the foil off the V-band on the front, sticking it back up into the car, and now I'm kind of eyeballing the muffler placement and where the tailpipe is going to go, because I want to make sure that I get all of that fit and kind of in the right area before I make the next piece of pipe that connects the X pipe to the muffler. So the last little thing I'm doing here is prepping the V-bands, and I like to install steel washers and nuts and anti-seize to keep them from galling up when we're using them. All right, well, it is a little after 12:30. I've got to go grab my 2 youngest daughters from school, and I've been working on fitting that front half of the X pipe and what all you saw me doing in this last part of the time lapse for a little over 2 hours. So you can kind of see I've kind of mocked up the tailpipe going over the axle, because the way I try and think about things is always planning for the next step so that I don't make something and then have to go back and remake it again. Remaking it again when I make a mistake, I don't bill for it. So I don't want to make a mistake if I can help it. So that's why I'm always trying to think ahead one step, because then that way I know the next step is good. And then sometimes I'll even think 2 or 3 steps ahead, like I did kind of with getting the tailpipe up there, or the first piece for the tailpipe, because I wanted to make sure that that could tuck up high enough to clear the rear end, but also still angle down and turn into the V-band and then come to the muffler. So, obviously not going to be done with that today. And if you're wondering why I've only done one side here, that's because I think it's going to be a lot easier to install the shifter cable without exhaust in the way, because the shifter cable, we made a custom mount that puts it up here above the transmission, and that can't go in until the ECU is mounted and the seats are mounted and the center console goes back in. Actually, the center console goes in before the seats, but it's kind of a process to try and keep from having to take 2 steps forward and then take 5 steps backwards to undo everything you did to access the area you need to work on. Now, sometimes it's inevitable. It just happens. So sometimes you just have to end up going backwards to make sure that what you're doing is going to clear the piece that you're about to install. Some of this custom fabrication stuff can make you pull your hair out. I have a rough idea of what I think I'm going to have in this exhaust, and I'll tell you at the end if I hit it. So we've got 2 hours just in this part of the fabrication, a little over 2 hours, and then you saw me prepping the V-bands, which I probably explained in the time lapse why I was doing that and what I was doing. So once we get this collector installed, this pipe should go pretty quick, but I would like to go ahead and get this completed today and maybe start on going over the axle with the tailpipe. And then I'll have a hanger over here somewhere, and probably one in front of the muffler, just because there's going to be a V-band here. There'll be an expander. I'm going to cut this off, weld the expander to it that goes right up to 3.5 inch. Then there's a V-band connects to there, and then I'll either do some kind of tab maybe that bolts the mufflers together to keep them from twisting, because if there's only a hanger back here and you've got a spot up in front of the muffler, you know, this muffler could twist from vibration. We don't want that. So maybe I make some kind of bridge that welds between the two and has a bolt in it, or we'll figure that out at some point. But for now, gotta go get my kids from school, and I'll be back to do a little slicing and dicing and custom modifying the mufflers, and possibly starting to work on a tailpipe, which there will also be a couple of hangers along the way for the tailpipe. You see where we custom made the filler neck right here, because this is a later model gas tank for the next generation of Mustang, and it uses a smaller filler neck here. And we did that because up in there somewhere we've got 3 Walbro 450 pumps, or TI Automotive 450 liter per hour pumps, which one of them should suffice for the engine. Now, most likely this thing is going to get some nitrous on it at some point, which is one of the reasons why we put 3.5 inch exhaust on it. Plan for it to make some pretty serious power. So the way we're doing some of the wiring and the programming for the ECU, we're going to be able to switch from some different fuel pumps based on a rotary input into the ECU. Got a Dominator, so might as well use up some of the ECU inputs and outputs to do some trick stuff. So I'm gonna go get my kids, and I'll be back in a little bit, but you'll see me now. All right, back from lunch and getting the kids. Got the kids first thing, got a little bit of lunch on the way back. And now that I'm back here looking at this, I think what I'm actually going to do is, I know the distance that I need to put onto here, so I'm gonna make that piece with the 3.5 inch V-band on it. And then I'm gonna test fit it over here on this side, and I might just go ahead and make 2 of them so that we'll have matching pieces there, and then I can maybe almost mount the mufflers kind of at the same time. So I need to get off the camera, get back to work, talk you guys through some of what I'm doing and some of my thought process, the best that I can remember it during the time lapse. TJ's over there making noise in Spencer's car. Removing even more of the interior metal. We're up to 400 pounds now of metal that we have taken out of the car so far, and I think we've got probably another 50 to go. So Drew's almost got the NC ready to go, and they're actually leaving tonight for a 20-hour drive to Missouri. So anyways, back to work. Well, like I said, going into this time lapse, I'm going to go ahead and make the 2 pieces that finish off in a 3.5 inch V-band, and then from there we will be doing the reducer cone to adapt the muffler up to 3.5 inch. And the reason we're doing that is because, say Donnie wants to go to a race somewhere, it has no muffler requirements, well, he can drop the exhaust off and still get the benefits of the X-pipe, but he can lose all of the weight of the mufflers and the tailpipes. You know, just something different. It'll sound pretty wild and crazy without the mufflers and the tailpipes on it. It'll probably sound pretty awesome with the mufflers and the tailpipes, but it's going to be probably another 2 or 3 weeks before we get to cranking this car up. This car will be going to Rocky Mountain Race Week, which is in, I believe, 2 months. And we are trying to get this thing wrapped up and up onto the dyno so that we can do some tuning on it and get it all prepared and ready to go racing. So what you just saw me do was take the reducer from a 4 inch to 3 inch reducer, and I cut it right in the middle, and made it a 3.5 to 3-inch reducer or expander, however you want to look at it. And we're welding that to the V-band that then mates to the muffler. And we did trim off the area on the mufflers that had the flanges that were designed to be clamped, because we're not doing any of that. Everything is going to be solid and welded in this thing. No exhaust leaks through the entire car. I'm doing a little machining here on the V-band because the muffler was designed for a 3-inch pipe to slide inside of it. So obviously the pipe itself is actually like 3 1/8 inch or so on the diameter. And the V-band was designed to fit a 3-inch pipe. So obviously there's a little bit of a mismatch there in what we needed to do. And I'll show in more detail here in just a minute. I wanted to make those fit a little bit better together instead of welding a really thin V-band flange to the muffler itself. So I'll show you that here in just a second. Wrap up the welding of the stuff onto the muffler. You see we foiled it again to back purge through the muffler. And in doing this, you use up a boatload of argon with all stainless welding. All right, well, you guys kind of saw in the time lapse how far I got today. I think I'm actually gonna wrap this video up here. Might be a little shorter than my normal ones, but I'm trying to get back to where I'm at least posting something every like second or third day. Like post a video, next day work on a video, post a video, next day work on a video, something like that. I am still working on my trip to PBIR. A lot of you have guessed the correct driver, but I'm not going to tell you who it is just yet. Some of you may have even figured it out with some internet research about the race. Anyways, we will have that video coming up, I'm hoping by the weekend. This weekend, I'm also going to do something a little bit out of the normal for me, but it does have to do with vehicles. You guys will be able to see that, what all we're doing there. I think it's gonna be fun, but I'm not gonna give that away either. But basically, so far on this exhaust, including welding the V-bands to the collectors, because I had done that yesterday, and then I had started making the X today, or I had fabricated the X and then I welded it first thing today, like you saw in the time lapse. So we made these two pieces, we fully welded that, we shortened the muffler, we shortened the reducer so that the reducer fits nice and tight into the muffler and to the V-band. We machined a V-band to fit the backside of the muffler because the mufflers were designed so that a 3-inch pipe slides inside of them. Well, we're welding a V-band directly to it, so obviously we don't need that to happen anymore. So I machined the V-band to be an outside pilot instead of an inside pilot, like where the pipe goes to the inside of the flange. I machined, do I have one left? Yeah. So you can see how this is how they were with the flange on the inside. Well, I chucked her up in the lathe and made it go the other way. So now it's got a nice pilot right there. Nice easy weld. It's supported really well. Nice and thick material to weld to. So it welds pretty nice. Yeah, I kind of rushed that one weld where it was smoking and carrying on because in about 3 minutes, I've got to get on the road to go get my oldest daughter from school. But yeah, that's gonna pretty much wrap up this video. Appreciate everybody watching and subscribing. We are almost at 280,000 subscribers. Like those numbers, they still just don't make sense to me. I mean, in a year, the shop channel has just exploded. Yeah, big thanks to Cletus for getting us going with the channel and letting us build mullet, where a lot of guys got on board with the mullet build. And I'm hoping a lot of you really are excited for my car up there. See that little box right there? That's more parts for my car. I have a room with lots of parts, and there is a rear end assembly up there, which I don't know if you can see. Probably not using that one because I'm going to build something even nastier. So I'm going to be selling that one. I still have the Lexus SC300. A few you guys kind of tire kicked this and nobody's actually come through and bought it yet. And for those of you that don't know, if you need any welding stuff, you can go to usaweld.com and use the code WinWithKSR and you'll get a discount on your order. That's always good. And of course, we've got merch at winwithksr.com. Hope you can hear me with all the fans running, but stay tuned for part 2 of the exhaust fabrication. And I'll probably finish the complete exhaust and give you all of the detailed time that we've got into it for the whole job. Right now, we're at 8 hours for what you see in the car, with a good idea of at least the muffler placement will be easy. Got a rough idea on the exhaust. Got to hang the bumper back on it to finalize where the tailpipes are coming out. But anyways, thanks again for watching. We'll see you guys next time.